The historic French region of Provence, located in the southeast corner of France between the Alps, the Mediterranean, the Rhone River and the upper reaches of the Durance River, was inhabited by Ligures since Neolithic times, by the Celtic since about 900 BC, and by Greek colonists since about 600 BC. It was conquered by Rome at the end of the 2nd century BC and became the first Roman province outside of Italy. From 879 until 1486, it was a semi-independent state ruled by the Counts of Provence. In 1481, the title passed to the Louis XI of France, and in 1486 Provence was legally incorporated into France. Provence has been a part of France for over 400 years, but the people of Provence, particularly in the interior, have kept a cultural identity that persists to this day. Prehistoric Provence. The coast of Provence has some of the earliest sites of human habitation known in Europe. Primitive stone tools were found in the Grotte du Vallon near Roquebrune-Cap-Martin, between Monaco and Menton, dating to between 1 million and 1.050 million years BC. The excavations at Terra Amata in Nice found signs of an encampment on a prehistoric beach, with traces of some of the earliest fireplaces found in Europe, dating to about 400,000 BC. Tools dating to the Middle Paleolithic and Upper Paleolithic were discovered in the Observatory Cave in the Jardin Exotique of Monaco. Tools found in the Grotte du Lazaret near Nice date to between 130,000 and 170,000 BC. The inhabitants of Provence during the Paleolithic age lived in caves or in huts made of branches covered with animal skins. Evidence found at the Grotte du Vallon shows they were more scavengers than hunters, using the tools to scrape meat from carcasses of bison, deer, rhinoceros, horses and other game killed by saber-toothed tigers, panthers and other predators. They endured the arrival and departure of 2 ice ages, which caused dramatic changes to the climate, vegetation and even the sea level. In 1985, a diver named Henry Koska discovered the mouth of a submarine cave 37 meters below the surface of the Calanque de Morgueil near Marseille. Inside, the walls of the Koska cave are decorated with drawings of bisons, seals, penguins, horses and outlines of human hands, dating to between 27,000 and 19,000 BC. Beginning in about 8,500 BC, at the end of the Neolithic period, the climate of Provence began to warm again. The sea rose gradually to its present level, and the forests began to retreat. The disappearance of the forests and the deer and other large game meant that the inhabitants of Provence had to survive on rabbits, snails and wild sheep. In about 6000 BC, the Castelnovian people, living around Châteauneuf-les-Martigues, were among the first people in Europe to domesticate wild sheep, which allowed them to stay in one place and to develop new industries. Inspired by imported pottery from the eastern Mediterranean, in about 6000 BC they created the first pottery to be made in France. At about the same time, another wave of new settlers from the east, the Chasséens, arrived in Provence. They were farmers and warriors, and gradually displaced the pastoral people from the lands. They were followed in about 2500 BC by another wave of settlers, also farmers, known as the Couronians, who arrived by sea and settled along the coast of what is now the Bouches-du-Rhône department. Ligures and Celts in Provence. In the 4th century BC, a people known by the Greeks and Romans as the Ligures inhabited Provence from the Alps to the Rhone. They were probably the descendants of the indigenous Neolithic peoples, who had lived through the Iron Age and the Bronze Age, but had not yet discovered iron. They did not have their own alphabet, but the language remains in place names in Provence ending in the suffixes asc, osc, ink, atis, and orni. The ancient geographer Posidonius wrote of them, "Their country is savage and dry. The soil is so rocky that you cannot plant anything without striking stones. The men compensate for the lack of wheat by hunting. They climbed the mountains like goats." Quote, "They were also warlike. They invaded Italy and went as far as Rome in the 4th century BC, and they later aided the passage of Hannibal on his way to attack Rome. Sometime between the 8th and 5th centuries BC, tribes of Celts, probably coming from Central Europe, also began moving into Provence. They had weapons made of iron, which allowed them to defeat the Ligures, who were still armed with bronze weapons. One tribe, called the Segobriga, settled near modern-day Marseille. The Catriges, Tricostans, and Cavares settled to the west of the Durance River. The Ligures were more numerous than the Celtic peoples, and the Celto-Ligures eventually shared the territory of Provence. Each tribe in its own alpine valley, a settlement along a river, each with its own king and dynasty. They built hilltop forts and settlements, later given the Latin name Oppida. Today the traces of 165 Oppida are found in the Var and as many as 285 in the Alps Maritimes. They worshipped aspects of nature, establishing sacred woods at St. Baumagemenos and healing springs at Glenum and Vernigues. Later, in the 5th and 4th centuries BC, the tribes formed confederations, the Vaucances from the Isère to the Vaucluse, the Cavares in the Comtat, and the Salians, for the Rhone River to the Var. The Celto-Ligures used the Rhone River to trade their local products: iron, silver, alabaster, marble, gold, resin, wax, honey and cheese, with other tribes in Gaul. Etruscan traders from Italy began to visit the coast. Etruscan amphorae from the 7th and 6th centuries BC have been found in Marseille, Cassis, and in hilltop Oppida in the region. Traces of the Celts and Ligures remain today in the ruins of the hilltop fortresses, in dolmens and other megaliths found in eastern Provence. In the stone shelters called bories found in the Luberon and Comtat, and in the rock carvings in the Valley of Marvels near Mount Bego in the Alps Maritimes at an altitude of 2,000 meters. The ruins of the Salian Oppidum of Glenum show traces of the old ramparts from the 6th to 3rd centuries BC, as well as vestiges of Celto-Ligurian temples and public buildings. The Greeks in Provence, traders from the island of Rhodes, were visiting the coast of Provence in the 7th century BC. Rhodes pottery from that century has been found in Marseille, near Martigues-Sinistre, and at Montgaro and Evenos near Toulon. The traders from Rhodes gave the names to the ancient town of Rhodanusir and to the main river of Provence, the Rhodanos, today known as the Rhone River. The first permanent Greek settlement was Massalia, established at modern-day Marseille in about 600 BC by colonists coming from Phocaea on the Aegean coast of Asia Minor. A second wave of colonists arrived in about 540, when Phocaea was destroyed by the Persians. Massalia became one of the major trading ports of the ancient world. At its height, in the 4th century BC, it had a population of about 6,000 inhabitants, on about 50 hectares surrounded by a wall. It was governed as an aristocratic republic, by an assembly of the 600 wealthiest citizens. It had a large temple of the cult of Apollo of Delphi on a hilltop overlooking the port, and a temple of the cult of Artemis of Ephesus at the other end of the city. The drachma coins minted in Massalia were found in all parts of Ligurian Celtic Gaul. Traders from Massalia ventured into France on the rivers Durance and Rhone, established overland trade routes to Switzerland and Burgundy, and as far north as the Baltic Sea. They exported their own products: local wine, salted pork and fish, aromatic and medicinal plants, coral and cork. The Massalians established a series of small colonies and trading posts along the coast, which later became towns. They founded Cythera, Taurois, Olbia, Pergantium, Cacabaria, Athenopolis, Antipolis, Nicaea, and Monoikos. They had a strong cultural influence on the interior of Provence. The Salian oppidum of Glenum had villas and an outdoor public meeting area built in the classical Greek style. The most famous citizen of Massalia was the mathematician, astronomer and navigator Pytheas. Pytheas made mathematical instruments which allowed him to establish almost exactly the latitude of Marseille. He was the first scientist to observe that the tides were connected with the phases of the moon. Between 330 and 320 BC he organized an expedition by ship into the Atlantic and as far north as England. He visited Iceland, Shetland, and Norway, where he was the first scientist to describe drift ice and the midnight sun. Though he hoped to establish a sea trading route for tin from Cornwall, his trip was not a commercial success, and it was not repeated. The Massalians found it cheaper and simpler to trade with northern Europe over land routes. Roman Provence. The Roman conquest of Provence. In 218 BC, when Hannibal marched the armies of Carthage through Provence on the way to Italy to attack Rome, the Massalians and Romans became allies. The Romans sent 60 ships with 2 legions led by Publius Scipio to Massalia in an unsuccessful attempt to intercept Hannibal. In 207 BC, when Hasdrubal led another Carthaginian army to attack Rome, Rome and Massalia became allies again. The Roman orator Cicero referred to Massalia as the most faithful allies of the Romans. The Massalians had good trade relations with peoples throughout Gaul. They were not a great military power and often had difficult relations with their neighbors, the Ligurian and Celtic Gauls. In the 2nd century BC, the Massalians appealed to Rome for help against the Gauls. They did not understand that Rome wanted subjects, not allies. In 181 BC, at the request of Massalia, the Romans suppressed Ligurian pirates based along the coast between Genoa and Albenga. Then, in 154 BC, when a Roman ambassador was abused and attacked at Cannes, the Roman consul Quintus Opimius led an army into Provence and defeated the Oxybi and the Daciates. Rome re-established the authority of Massalia along the coast from the Rock of Monaco to the mouth of the Rhone River. In 125 BC, an alliance of Celtic peoples, the Salians, threatened Massalia itself. In 125, a Roman army led the consul Fulvius Flaccus crossed the Alps by either the Geneva Pass or Col de l'Arche, marched along the valley of the Durance, and subdued the Ligures of Barcelona, the Vaucances and the Salians. The following year another Roman army, led by Sextius Calvinus, marched into Provence and captured the capital of the Salians, the hilltop fortress of Oppidum d'Entremont, as well as the sanctuary of Rue Capiters and the Oppida of St. Blaise and Beaulieu. After the battle, Sextius Calvinus destroyed the hilltop fortress of Entremont. At the foot of the hill, where thermal springs were located, he founded a new town, called Aqua Sextii. Later it became known simply as Aix, then as Aix-en-Provence. In 122 BC the Romans faced a new uprising of the Gauls, led by another Salian chief, Teuton Motulus, who was joined in his uprising by the Arvernes and the Alabriges. A new Roman consul, Domitius Ahenobarbus, met the Gauls with a new and terrifying weapon, elephants, and was able to defeat the much larger Gallic army at the Battle of Vindalium on the Sorgue River. In 121 BC, a new Roman army led by Fabius Maximus came to Provence to reinforce Domitius. Domitius defeated a Gallic army of Allobroges and Arvernes on the plains of the Rhone Valley. 100,000 Gauls were killed in the battle. After the battle, Domitius claimed the entire territory between Italy and Spain as a Roman province. In 118 BC, at the mouth of the Rhone River, his soldiers founded the first Roman colony outside of Italy, called Narbo Martius. Within this territory, only the Greek port colony of Massalia remained independent. In 109 BC, Provence faced a new invasion from the north. An enormous migration of Celto-Germanic tribes, the Teutons and Cimbri, left the Baltic coast and moved south into Gaul, looking for a new homeland. They moved into the Rhone Valley and in 105 BC defeated the Roman legions of Mallius Maximus and Servilius Caepio Tarasio. The Romans sent one of the best generals, Gaius Marius, to Provence with 6 legions to block the path of the Teutons and Cimbri toward Italy. Gaius Marius waited patiently for 2 years, while the Teutons and Cimbri ventured into Spain and northern Gaul. The Roman general kept his soldiers busy digging a canal next to the Rhone River between Arles and Fosse, allowing his soldiers to be supplied from the sea and also making navigation much easier through the Rhone Delta. In 102 BC, the Cimbers went east while the Teutons and the new allies, the Ambrons, marched south through Provence, heading toward northern Italy. Gaius Marius met them near Aix in autumn 102 BC and defeated them, killing, according to Plutarch, 100,000 Teutons and Ambrons. Italy and Provence were safe from invasion for a century afterward. The most famous of the proconsuls of the new province, called Narbonensis, was Julius Caesar, who governed it from 58 to 49 BC. He was rarely there, using Narbonensis as a supply base for his famous wars against the Gauls further north. Until this time, the city of Massalia had guarded its independence and profited from its alliance with Rome. However, in 49 BC, when the struggle for the leadership of Rome began between Pompey the Great and Julius Caesar, the leaders of Massalia made the fatal decision to back Pompey. Caesar immediately sent an army to Massalia and besieged the city. He built long trenches around the town, as he had done against the Gauls at Alesia, and cut down the sacred forests of the Ligures to build siege towers. He also had constructed a dozen warships at Arles, and his new fleet, led by his legate Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus, defeated the Massalian fleet off the Isles of Friuli, and blockaded the city from the sea. Disease ravaged the population. In September 49 BC, the soldiers of Caesar's legate Trebonius breached the walls of the Massalia and captured it. The Massalians paid a heavy price for backing Pompey. The city lost its independence, had to surrender its warships and treasury, and was forced to give up all of its territories on the coast and interior, except for the Stochades Islands and Nice. The final phase of the Roman conquest of Provence took place between 24 BC and 14 BC, when the Emperor Augustus Caesar sent an army to conquer the last Ligurian tribes around modern Cisteron, Dina, Castellane and in other mountainous valleys, who still resisted Roman domination. In 08 BC, the Emperor Augustus built a triumphal monument at Laturbi to commemorate the final pacification of the region. The Pax Romana in Provence. The Pax Romana, or Roman peace, in Provence lasted for nearly 3 centuries. During this period, all of Provence, from the Alps to the Pyrenees, had for the first time the same language, administration, currency and culture. Residents of Provence felt secure enough to give up the fortified hilltop towns and move down into the plains. As Pliny wrote, it was more than a province, it was another Italy. In addition to the vast province of Gallia Narbonensis, which reached all the way to Spain, with its capital at Narbonne, In 07 BC the Emperor Augustus created Alps Maritimi, where the Alps met the Mediterranean, with its capital at Cemenelum, in the hills above present-day Nice, and also created a small planned kingdom called Alps Cottii, in the Alps along the Italian border further north, with its capital at Segusium, the modern-day Susa in Piedmont. The Emperor Nero officially made Alps Cottii a Roman province in 67 AD. The purpose of these new provinces was to secure the passes of the Alps for the passage of Roman armies and traders. The Romans established 25 towns and a common system of administration throughout Provence. Julius Caesar created 3 coloniae, or colonies, for the veterans of his legions at Forum Julii, Arles and Arezzo, now Orange, Vaucluse. Citizens of these towns had the full rights of Roman citizens, including the right to vote. The Emperor Augustus founded 7 more colonies of Roman army veterans at Apt, Avignon, Carpentras, Cavaillon-Dye, Dina, and Ries. Other types of towns, classified as either municipia or as civitates, were founded throughout the rest of Provence. Some of the capital towns of villages of Gallic tribes were transformed into Roman municipia. The capital of the Briganti tribe became the Roman Municipium of Briancorn. The residents of these municipia and civitates had most of the rights and obligations of Roman citizens, but no right to vote. To connect these towns and to allow the easy movement of Roman armies between Italy and Spain or up the Rhone Valley, Roman engineers constructed a series of new roads, solidly built and regularly maintained. The oldest was the Via Domitia, built in 118 BC, which went all the way from the Col de Montgeneva, the easiest crossing point of the Alps, through Sisteron, Apt and Cavaillon to Tarascon on the Rhone River, and then along the coast to Narbonne and to Spain. The Via Aurelia ran from Italy to the Rhone Valley, passing through Chimay, Fréjus, and Aix. The Via Agrippa ran up the Rhone Valley from Arles to Lyon, through Avignon, Orange, and Valence. It was completely rebuilt 6 times during the High Roman Empire. After Massalia lost its independence and its territories, the town of Arles became the most important economic centre of Provence. It had inherited the territories taken from Massalia, it had the most important bridge across the Rhone, and it was the meeting point of the trade routes along the coast and up and down the Rhone River. The major products of Provence were wheat, oil, along with pork, mutton, and the sausages and other preserved meats of Avignon and Arles, and fish from Antibes and Fréjus. The Emperor Domitian banned the planting of vineyards in Provence, but the region around Marseille still produced famous wines, and all the cities of Provence imported wines from Italy. Arles and the other towns of Provence were the showcases of Roman wealth, culture and power. The Roman amphitheatre at Arles could seat 20,000 spectators. Roman engineers and architects built monuments, theatres, baths, villas, fora, arenas and aqueducts throughout Provence, many of which still exist. The Pax Romana in Provence lasted until the middle of the 3rd century. Germanic tribes invaded Provence in 257 and 275. At the beginning of the 4th century, the court of Roman Emperor Constantine was forced to take refuge in Arles. By the end of the 5th century, Roman power in Provence had vanished, and an age of invasions, wars, and chaos began. The end of the Roman Empire and arrival of Christianity in Provence. In 297, the Emperor Diocletian redrew the provincial borders within the Roman Empire, dividing Gallia Narbonnensis into 2 provinces. The new province east of the Rhone was called Viennensis, after its capital, Vienne. In 397, this new province was split in two. The province of Vienne kept the Rhone Valley, Arles and Vienne, while a new province, called Narbonnensis II, was created, with its capital at Aix. The Romans also added new layers of administration, called dioceses and prefectures, and new officials to govern the provinces. During the late 3rd century, invasions of the Franks and Alamans ravaged other parts of Roman Gaul, but Provence was largely spared. The high walls of Arles and Marseille successfully resisted barbarian invaders. The ports of Provence prospered, thanks to the trade with the Roman Mediterranean world. Toulon produced the special purple dye used for the robes of the emperors. Marseille developed a profitable commerce, first importing and then making elaborate carved sarcophagi for the wealthy residents of all of Gaul. Communities of Syrians, Phoenicians and Jews settled in Marseille and Arles. Arles built a new port on the right bank of the Rhone, and in 418 the Roman Emperor Honorius wrote of Arles that all the riches of the Orient, perfumes of Arabia, delicacies of Assyria, are found in such abundance that one would believe they were the products of the countryside. The circus and amphitheatre of Arles were still being used for Roman games in the 4th century. The Emperor Constantine himself visited Arles in 314 and 316. The emperors Avitus and Majorian, among the last of the Roman emperors, resided there respectively in 455 and 459. During Roman times the people of Provence worshipped a wide variety of gods and religions. They worshipped goddesses of fecundity, gods living in springs of fresh water, gods of nature, and Mount Saint Victoire, worshipped by its Ligure name, Vinter. They worshipped deities which combined Roman and Ligure Celtic gods, such as Mars Teutates, worshipped at Aix and Orange. In the large cities, they worshipped the traditional Roman gods and goddesses. Jupiter, Juno and Minerva were worshipped in Arles and Aix. In Marseille, they worshipped the Greek goddesses of the sea. Since the time of Julius Caesar, they also worshipped the official cult of the Roman emperors and later the empresses. For the time of the Emperor Vespasian, an official of this cult, called the Flamen Augusti, was designated each year to oversee worship of the emperors, placing the busts and shrines throughout Provence. Later in the empire, Eastern cults began to take hold in Provence. Traces of the cult of Mithra have been found in Arles, the Vaison and Glanum, of the Syrian god Baal in Marseille, and Egyptian goddess Isis at Marseille and Arles, and most popular of all, Cibola, the mother of deities, worshipped at Marseille, Arles, Vence, Vaison, Riez, and Die. There were many legends about the earliest Christians in Provence. One claimed that the bishop of Arles, Lazarus, buried at Marseille, was the same Lazarus healed by Jesus. Another claimed that his sister Martha came to Provence to convert Tarascon. Another popular legend claimed that Saints Mary Magdalene along with Saints Mary Salome and Mary Jacobi came to Saints Maurice de la Mer in the Camargue by boat, and she settled in the mountains at Saint Baume. A skull which is described as that of Mary Magdalene is displayed in the Basilica of Saint Maximin le Saint Baume. These legends first appeared during the Carolingian period. Relics claiming to be those of the three Marys were discovered in the 15th century and put on display. However, there is no other historical evidence to support these legends. In the second quarter of the 3rd century, the Christian Church in Rome began to send missionaries to evangelize Provence. By Catholic tradition, the first bishops in Provence were Trophimus of Arles and Paul of Narbonne. There were active churches and bishops in Arles in 254, Marseille in 314, Orange, Vaison and Apt in 314, Gavillon, Dina, Embrun, Gap, and Fréjus at the end of the 4th century, Aix-en-Provence in 408, Carpentras, Avignon, Ries, Chimay and Vence in 439, Antibes in 442, Toulon in 451, Senez in 406, St. Paul-Trois-Châteaux in 517, and Glandives in 541. In the beginning of the 4th century, with the conversion and baptism of Constantine, Christianity became the official religion of the empire. Later, under the emperors Gratian and Theodosius, being a Christian was not only possible, it was required for everyone. Churches were built in all the large cities of Provence, usually near the city walls, and often using the sites and even the pillars and other architectural elements of old Roman temples. A baptistry was usually constructed next to the church. The oldest still existing Christian structure in Provence is the baptistry of the cathedral in Fréjus, dating from the 5th century. By the 5th century there were 21 bishops in Provence, chapels on the large estates and churches in almost every town. At about the same time, in the 5th century, the first 2 monasteries in Provence were founded, Lérins, on an island near Cannes, and Saint Victor in Marseille. The monasteries became the centers of learning and religious doctrine for Provence and for much of Gaul. Monks from Lérins Abbey became the bishops in Arles, Chimay, Vence, Ries, and other cities in Provence. They actively promoted the cult of saints, local martyrs, and of the Virgin Mary.